Good morning, my favorite carbaholics. It's Henry with Henry's Bread Kitchen, bringing you another episode of COVID-19 Bake. I don't like that. Um, Quarantine Bake? Most of us aren't quarantined anymore. So just how about bake? I'd like to welcome all you new members. My goodness, you guys surprise us every single week with where you're from and what you're doing, what your level of expertise is. Congratulations, you guys, for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We value every single one of you. It was a wonderful time having Steve here last week. Steve Schwartz is a character. I just really like hanging out with him. So, Steve, if you ever want to come back and do something else, let me know, because this could be a thing. All right, today, our mission are French baguettes. Now, we have to be careful when we talk about baguettes. Let me just talk about baguettes for a second. French baguettes are probably the most popular bread in the world because they're eaten all around the world. And as a result, the recipes for them have changed a little bit to suit the different cultures. Vietnam is one. The French occupied that area for a while, and besides some random architecture, they left a French baguette, which is called now a banh mi. It's a smaller version of a baguette, a little bit different recipe. But if we're making French baguettes today with a poulish. But if you're making authentic French baguettes and you're in France, then you're subject to the law. The law dictates how much each baguette weighs, how much it has to weigh, what ingredients are in it. It has to be only flour, water, salt, and a little yeast. Can't be anything more, no extenders, no bromating, nothing that will make it last longer on the shelf. So this, it can be an extremely difficult bread to master, particularly when you're doing it the traditionnel. How do you say that in French, Französisch. So when you're doing that, you've got a double hydration, you've got an overnight uh, bulk fermentation. So it takes about 2 days to make a baguette. We're not doing that method. We're going to get you familiar with the basics, and then we're going to move on from there so that you'll have all the tools necessary to do a good job. And if you ever watch the Karate Kid, the wax on, wax off, it's kind of what I've been doing to you guys. I've kind of been introducing more complex uh, shaping and folding so that when it comes time to do a more complex bread, that won't be new to you and you'll be able to jump right in. So you shouldn't have any problem with this today. So let's get started. First thing we need to do is to make sure that we have our poulish from last night. 8 to 10 hours of flour, water, a tiny bit of yeast coming together to make a poulish. See how bubbly that is? It was much more bubbly. I just slammed it down on the counter and all the bubble. So totally, that should weigh 250 grams. And we'll be using grams today because when you get into more complex breads like this, it's so much more important that you be accurate with your weights and measures. Okay? So to the poulish that you prepared last night, we're going to add 140 grams of warm water. And I'm going to add it directly to the poulish. Come on. There we go. 140 grams. And that just helps it to release from the bowl better. See that how it releases? Now, in another bowl, we're going to add our dry ingredients. And in that bowl, we're going to add 300 grams of all-purpose flour. 300 grams of all-purpose flour is in here. Then we're going to put, with that, 5 grams of salt, 1 gram of yeast. Now, I'm going to put the yeast in first. That's 1 gram. And if you've got a scale and you don't have a micro scale, it's hard to weigh out 1 gram. It's about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So it's really hard to weigh out 1 gram because it doesn't move. It's hard to weigh 5 grams. But bigger numbers, easier. Sometimes you might want to add it to a larger number that's already there. So 5 grams of sea salt. I'm using a flaky sea salt. It's my new favorite thing. Now, to keep these two happy, I'm going to mix the yeast into the flour. And then I'm going to add the salt. And that way they stay separate. And the flour begins then to act like a buffer between the two. Now, in a stand mixer, I always add the water first. If I'm mixing by hand, I like to mix with the flour first so I can control how much flour is going into it at a time. So it's easier to handle. So make a little well in the center. Might be able to see this. Make a little well in the center. This thing I'm using is a Dutch whisk. You can do this with your hand. You can do it with a spatula or wooden spoon. There it goes. And that is your polish and your yeast. When you're making a traditional French baguette, you use a levain, which is a portion of sourdough starter and flour and water. It's a much stiffer levain than this is. So I'm going to come in here and start right in the middle and mix that, adding a little flour as I go. Now pretty soon, it's going to be too much for this whisk to handle. That's when we get our hands dirty. And this is not so bad. This makes 3 baguettes. And remember, we're making these for, our commercial, domestic ovens. Commercial ovens are a lot bigger. Your baguettes will be a lot bigger. But this is what we got. I've got a little bowl with some water because sticky dough, wet hands. And you want to keep one hand clean as best you can. Always keep one hand clean. So now I'm just going to go in here and push and just move this around to try to take out all this flour that's sitting around here. All right, when I'm close, I'm going to scrape down the sides with the dough and pull it out on the counter. Now here, I'm not trying to develop any gluten. I'm not trying to do anything other than incorporate the dry flour. When you need dough, you're gonna open up the damp parts. That's what you want to put down on top of the dry dough. So what's the reason? You've heard me say this a dozen times. What is the reason you don't want to have any dry dough remaining in your bowl? Well, it's because once your dough starts to take shape and has been hydrated, those dry pieces may stick to it or get into it, and for some reason, they are resistant to hydration. So they don't want any water. And you'll have a piece of bread that has little clumps in it that tastes like flour. That can be avoided. But just making sure there's nothing there. Okay? No wet anything. Take my dough scraper. See all that? That could have made it into your dough, but I'm just going to put this in the trash. Put this in a little ball. It's not smooth, and the thing is if you tear this right now, then maybe there's some gluten development. But you see how it tears? That's because there's no protein chains yet developed, no gluten chains. So this goes in covered for 10 minutes, and we'll be back and do something else. I do a set of turns. Couldn't be any easier. So let's cover that. In 10 minutes, we'll be back to, but I've got stuff for you, so just stick around. During those 10 minutes, you want to keep it on the counter. You don't have to stick it in a warm place, because what we're doing is trying to take a lot of the, I hate this, a lot of the time it takes to make bread. Which is why, if you've done any research on the internet, or if you've watched any bread baking videos on the internet, you'll mostly see no knead bread. And that just means that you're doing what we just did, making sure that there's no flour. It's abbreviated, it's an abbreviated autolyse. An autolyse. AUTOLYSE. And that's when you let the flour and water sit together for a period of time. Especially if you have whole grains, let those sit together, just the flour and the water, for 30 minutes easily. Easily 30 minutes, longer than ever. Then you'll add the remainder of your ingredients. So an autolyse is always done without the salt and without the leaven, your sourdough starter. So let those, because, especially if you're using whole grains, it's still got the germ, it's still got the endosperm, it's still got the whole grain there. And it takes a while for the water to permeate through those barriers and hydrate the grains and hydrate, your dough. So because it's going to get the hydration somewhere. And if you bake it without having done that, so you'll notice that your breads are dense, tight, because they weren't properly autolysed. And most home bakers don't even know a thing in the world about autolyse. So take your recipe, put your flour and water in a bowl, go have a cup of coffee. Come back, and you'll be surprised at what's happened to your dough. Then add your starter, and then your salt, and you're on your way to make sourdough bread. This is another piece of sourdough. I used some of this morning. Some of this starter this morning. And it's not in its normal jar, because I like to take it out of this container one day when I feed it once a week and change the container. Because if you get crud, and I know a lot of you have this, if you get crud all on the outside of your container and you just keep living like that, then you will attract mold, bad bacteria, and that could ruin your starter. So I used some of this morning, and I'm going to just show you how strong this is. Her name's Vitaly. That means life giver. If you've got a sourdough starter and you haven't named her yet, or him, name them. Now, this is the float test. This is how I determine whether or not there's enough CO2 gas in my starter to add to my bread dough so that it will leaven my bread dough, make it rise. And then I feed it every other day, and I keep it in the refrigerator. And if I'm going to bake with it like I did this morning, I took it out early this morning and set it on the counter because I fed it right before I went to bed. And it's beautiful. It slows down the microorganisms. It slows them way down, and then you get more flavor. But if you're baking if you've got whole wheat or rye flour in your everyday starter, you're feeding it every day. Unless you're doing that specifically to make a rye bread or some other kind of bread, then it's, whole grains are going to burn faster. So you're going to get a rise and a fall much faster than you would if you just use all-purpose flour. And all-purpose flour has everything you need to make a good starter, so there's no reason why not to do it. Feed it, let it sit on the counter for an hour, get its legs, put it in the refrigerator. Get ready to use it, take it out of the refrigerator, and let it come to room temperature, and then go ahead and use it. As long as you fed it right before, that night. So pretend this has been sitting here for 10 minutes, and it won't look much different than this. So now we're going to do our turns every 10 minutes. And all that is, see how you can see this, is you dampen your hands, just grab one end of it and fold it to the middle. Next piece, fold it to the middle. Now this won't have developed any bubbles or any sign of real fermentation yet. What you're doing is strengthening the gluten so that when that happens, the gluten will be in a position to trap the molecule, the CO2 molecule. So now I made a nice ball out of it. It's almost smooth, but there are areas that aren't. Almost smooth, but there's some areas that aren't. So we're going to put that back in here. We're going to do a total of 4 turns. Then we're going to let it rest for an hour to proof. So let's sit that out of the way for another 10 minutes. And I'm going to pull out some that should be farther along. Forgot my bowl. So here's my workaround. And I was so happy I thought of this, I didn't spray it. I don't want to tear this, so I'm being careful. It's going to tear some, but I'm being careful. Cost of doing business. So now this is all up. It's been resting an hour. It's ready to shake. I'm going to put a little bit of flour down because I'm not going to get more flour into the dough. That's important. we're not going to get any more flour into the dough, but we're going to get it on the dough. That's okay, because if you got a sticky dough and you continue to add flour, it's going to soak it up, and you'll end up with a dense, heavy bread with no crumb. Now, when I turn this bread out just now, the bottom is going to be forever the top of my bread. That's always going to be the top. Now, because I have a scale and I've measured this, I should get about 230 grams per baguette. I'm doing 3. So let's do it. If there's a orientation to this and it's rectangular like this, then cut with the rectangle, because you want these pieces that you're pre-shaping to be long. I want to make sure I did my math right. 230 grams. I was right. It's too much. Should be half of this. Notice I'm not degassing this a lot. All right. So these are all 230 grams or thereabouts. Now, you see how puffy this is? And that's good. We're going to put the yeast back in touch with its food source, but we don't. So I'm folding the sides into the middle. You see that? Folded the edges into the middle. And then I'm going to take the top, fold it to the middle. Just make sure it's sealed. Just tap it a little bit, and then all the way over and seal that in. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect because it's a pre-shape. We're developing a relationship with our dough. We're telling it that's the shape we're going to be. So start getting in line. So you take your dough, fold it into the middle, the top to the middle, then all the way over. Seal the edge. We're just getting the dough familiar with what it needs to be. Okay? Then the last one, all the way over. Where it needs to be. Now these only have to sit for a few minutes. This is a damp cloth, it's clean. I'm just going to let that sit there. Now, the reason we do this, the reason we pre-shape our dough, is because gluten in the bread is a lot like muscle. When you're lifting weights and you're curling or you're doing squats or whatever, your muscles tighten up after you've been doing it a while. So what we want to do is give them a chance to relax. I'll give it a chance to relax. That usually takes about 5 minutes, and then you can keep moving. Whenever you're rolling dough out or handling dough in any kind of way and it comes springing back at you, give it some time to relax. So this is the first one I did. Can you see that? So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to even it out, not flatten it terribly. stretch it. That helps strengthen the gluten. And I'm not folding to the middle this time. I'm just right here on the edge, just so that it'll be sealed later. Now I'm going from the outside edge to the middle. Outside edge to the middle. You see that? Outside edge to the middle. Then I'm going to flip it around 9 degrees and do the same thing. Outside edge to the middle. And we've done this before. We did this with hoagie rolls, and that was to get you ready for this. Now we're going to go all the way from the outside, all the way to the other end, and seal. I push down with my fingertips to seal it. You hear the little bubbles pop. You'll find more accomplished bakers than I do. They come in with their hand like that, and they're not hitting the dough now. They're hitting just that seal. That's all they're doing, is making that seal tight. And once you have that, roll it out. Just nice and easy. I don't let it sit for a minute. Relax. It'll be much easier to handle. So stretch. Get back in right at the beginning. I see that issue right here. So I'm going to fold from the end into the center. End into the center again. Then from the outside all the way over, I seal with my fingers. Now the key is, you don't want to have these little thin spots. You want your baguettes to be as uniform as possible. I'm not going to push it any more than that. Just going to let it rest until I finish with this one. All right. Another characteristic of a baguette is that the ends are pointy and sealed. This is the one we started with. I have a little weak spot right here that's thinner than most. Let's see if I can't get rid of it, or at least disguise it. So with my feet open, I'm going to come all the way out to the ends, and then you can go in opposite directions or the same direction. Just give me a little point at the end. All right. I got to do something with it, so give me a second. All right. We're going to use a baker's couche. It's spelled sort of couche, but this is a baker's couche. This is a brand new one, so it hasn't been broken in yet. It's made of like a flax. It feels sort of like burlap. Burlap doesn't cost $20. I tried to make my own. Doesn't work. So what a couche does is allows your bread to rise without sticking to one another. And it's a wonderful thing when you get it working right. Now, you don't wash these. This is like your Banneton. You never wash them. You can take it outside and shake it, but you want this flour in here. And if you're honest, think about it. There's nothing dirty to get dirty. So there's one. There's two. See how much easier these handle? Just with that little bit of rest. And there are three. Does everybody see that well? So now I'm gonna pull this bit, and if you don't feel like you have enough flour, and baguettes typically have flour on their surface anyway. Pull it up high enough that when they start to proof, they don't proof into each other, and you get dough that's stuck to one another. Now I usually take a rolling pin and stick it here so that it proofs up and not out. And then the rest of this goes over to keep it tight, covered. And in my kitchen, I have something else that holds it nice and tight. So those will rest now for an hour. Now you want to put your oven at 500 degrees. And you want to put a pan. The biggest difference between French baguettes that are made in a bakery and what you and I are doing is that a bakery has steam injected ovens. And that steam allows for the baguette to expand and not develop a crust right away. So you can kind of get around it by maybe a cast iron skillet at the bottom of your pan, the bottom of your oven, and as you put your baguettes in, you dump some ice into there, or you use a spray bottle and spray the walls, spray over your baguettes, and close your oven. That's not a lot of steam. Ice in the bottom of it works better, but anything is just trying to emulate and imitate what the professionals do. So those are approved like this for about an hour, and then we're going to score them. Now, if you are into baking, you'll soon find out that there are tons of little pieces of equipment you think you need in order to make your bread better. It's like playing golf. Man, if I had that club, I know pretty doggone well I could break 70. So you don't need to buy it all. A lot of it you do. And you don't have to get it all at one time, just a little bit at a time. And I'm going to save you some money right here. The blade that we use for our bread is called a loaf. And they sell fancy ones with blades attached. The cheaper, you'll know it's cheap. So I've got a razor blade here, a pair of chopsticks. Take the skinny end, and please be careful with this razor. It will cut you. Bend it like I did, and come in from the back. I'm in the big hole. Okay, let's come back out. Sometimes that happens because these chopsticks aren't uniform. There you go. Y'all got me worried about getting cut. So it's bent in and back out. Make sure it's low enough to stay on. And now you have a bread loam. See that? If it's and it's curved, which is a good thing, because if you're scoring, you want to get that first corner of your blade into the surface of the dough and have it fold up a little. You never want to catch the dough with the back end, and that's what a lot of people do. Is they end up scoring like this, and they catch the dough with the back end, and they drag it, pull it, and it looks like you pulled it. So it takes practice, a lot of practice. The other thing about baguettes, I'm looking for an empty piece of paper. You're not going to be able to see this, I don't know. But the other thing about baguettes is scoring. Now, this is the most, this takes the most expertise. Out of everything else, this is somehow the hardest thing people have trouble with, if it's one thing. So if this is your baguette, the pointy ends, if that's your baguette, can you see that? You're going to score it. Now, traditional French baguettes are scored with 5 slashes. As a matter of fact, it's mandated by law. But those are big pieces of bread, and you can get 5 slashes on them. And the tradition is that if you're doing something less or something smaller, then we do 3 slashes. We want odd numbers. It's not going to taste any different. You're just trying to perfect something that's becoming your craft. So that's why we pay attention to it. If this is your baguette, you want to score within these 2 lines. See how I made those 2 inside lines? Inside lines. So now when I score, I want to go from here to here. I want to come back and overlap by a third and go here. Come back and overlap by a third and go there. Does that make sense? You see that? This is the hardest thing to get people to do. Pay attention. Because a lot of people want to score a baguette this way. And that's going to make your bread turn out cattywampus. It's going to be all over the place. If you're scoring in a shallow angle, what is that, about 30 degrees, about not even that much. Right down the center, pretend you draw 2 lines down the center of your baguette, or just on the outsides of your baguette, and you have to stay between those 2 imaginary lines. That's how you know you've got it right. Okay? So, because we are short on time, we're going to go ahead and score. So you can see that, because it's time to bake. Still another 10 minutes for this. Now see, it doesn't see my hand so much anymore. And all I'm doing, folks, is going from the end into the middle. Into the middle. That's all I'm doing in this bowl. And then once I've done it, I just tighten it up. It's going right back in. Okay, we do 4 of those turns before we let it rest for an hour in a warm place, and then we can. After that, we can do what we just did, shake. So let's, some people score their breads before they're proofed. I've never been one of those. I like to score them after they're proofed. But there's argument both ways. So in this way, we don't have all day. So let's go and see what we got. Use your imagination. And I have fucked up a little, but not the way we want. This is a baguette tray. You don't need this, but it's nice. You've seen me use the silicone ones too. They're not, absolutely necessary, but they're nice. They have little perforations in them, little holes, to let the steam get through and the heat get through. So I'm going to take, and what we would traditionally have is a board. It could be a piece of cardboard, or it could be a baker's peel. It could be anything. But you take that board and you set it right here between them. You lift this up, and your baguette would come up on that board like that. But I'm not using a board today. I'm just going to be gentle. Because they're not proofed completely, it's going to be gentle. Now, with your couche, fold it back up. Not tight. You don't want it with a lot of creases in it. So, and that flour stays in there. Just remember how you opened it. When it gets too full, or you got little pieces of dough, take it out back, shake it downwind. So let's think about this for a second. We remember our line, and we're going to try and stay in there. It's not easy. So I'm going to go here, here, and here. That's pretty good. Straight down. See that? Just imagine those lines I talked about. Imagine the lines that are your boundary for your scoring. So I went from here to there, half, come back up a third to there, come back up a third to there. Now these will open up and be very nice. I don't dump them out. Okay, so I'm going to put these to proofing, let them finish proofing. You could also do these on a cookie sheet or baking sheet with parchment paper. So just put mine in the tray, take it in the oven. The rest of the method applies. You have to have your oven preheated, and you have to have, when your oven dings and it says it's preheated, that's not preheated. You give it another 30 minutes for it to really get hot, particularly if you have a stone in there. Let it come to temperature. And as soon as you put your baguettes in, put some spray bottled water in there, or spray it, or toss some ice cubes into the bottom, into a pan or into a cast iron skillet. And you're baking these for about 15 minutes. Here's something I did yesterday that didn't so much pass the test. So let's see what they look like. Shall we? Doing this live, because if it sucks. So let's go this way. This is not the way you cut them typically. How about that? There we go. That's not bad. See that? Little holes. So this is about as good as you're going to get in an environment with no steam oven. Or when you, and that's good. That's a good loaf. See the flour I told you that you would sometimes have on top? So now when you're serving, you can eat it. Couples can walk out of the bakery and eat as they're going down the street. This is a very blue collar, useful bread. You cut it like this, and you make a sandwich, a street vendor, and you're off. You can carry your own sandwich, you can carry your own food, and keep on getting on with your life. Or you can have, you know, pieces like this that are perfect for dipping in some olive oil with a little Tuscan seasoning. Not Tuscan bread, Tuscan seasoning. See this? That's nice. It's very nice. Okay, so any questions? Please comment down below. As soon as we get this edited, we'll put it on our YouTube page. And for all you YouTube members, we're trying to do this commercial. Join us on YouTube. Like and subscribe. But all of the videos that we do and some that we don't are on YouTube. It's at Henry's Bread Kitchen. And if you want to see pictures of things that we do that you may not otherwise see, they're at Henry's Bread Kitchen on Instagram. Okay? I enjoy it. This is good, and it's not as difficult as I made it sound earlier in the week. You can do this. It's just technique and technique and technique. Practice. We're not going for perfection. We're going for progress. Listen, you should be able to pronounce every ingredient in your bread. If you can't, then maybe it's not bread, but something else altogether. All right? See you next week. Be blessed.